My name is David Madison, the 24th of April 2020, and this is episode 3 in a series of videos, Required Homework for Christians. Having served my time amongst church folks for 9 years as a minister of 2 parishes, I know a thing or two about what they need to learn. In the previous episode, I pointed out that printing the words of Jesus in red in the Gospels is deceptive. The Aramaic that Jesus spoke became Greek in the Gospels written decades later, and then we read his words in differing English translations. There are too many chances for errors along the way for the red letters to guarantee anything. But there's a much larger, much bigger problem, and for sure Christians need to do their homework on this. How were the original, the real words of Jesus preserved? Most of the people who followed him around to hear his preaching were illiterate, probably 95% of them. They wouldn't have been able to write them down if they wanted to. And even those who could read didn't carry around pads of paper or papyrus and pens. Well, probably not. We can be sure that there were no stenographers trailing Jesus. Even when people got home, would they have been sure to write down his words with dead accuracy? If you hear someone give a speech or a sermon, could you, hours or days later, write down without error even 2 or 3 sentences you heard? Just how do we know for sure what any historical figure from the past has said? We find them quoted in letters, diaries, transcriptions, newspaper accounts. That's how historians can write accurate histories of Lincoln, Jefferson, Voltaire, Queen Victoria. Nothing like that at all exists for Jesus. The fact is we have no clue for when or how the words of Jesus were written down for the first time. It's a big hole in the historical record. His words just turn up in the Gospels written decades later for Greek-speaking readers. There is no way at all to explore how that happened. One favorite argument of devout scholars is that the words of Jesus were handed down through reliable oral tradition. But there's no way to verify that claim either. We're asked to believe that Jesus said something, it was remembered accurately, and then told and retold and retold for 40 years until the first Gospel, Mark, was written. We know what actually happens. By the time something has been repeated for the 10th time, the original version has been mangled or lost. And consider this strange thing. The Apostle Paul was well-traveled in the ancient Christian community, and in his letters he doesn't quote Jesus. Why didn't he come across the reliable oral tradition of Jesus' sayings supposedly in circulation? Even stranger, Paul's account of the Eucharist in 1 Corinthians 11, based on his visions, that got copied by Mark in his gospel. So, reliable oral tradition wasn't a thing. New Testament scholars have been stumped for decades. How can we tell what Jesus really said? There's no way at all to find out. Authors in the ancient world commonly invented speeches for the heroes they wrote about. That's why some scholars refer to the Gospels as religious novels. And please don't tell us that God inspired the Gospel authors to write the true words of Jesus. Perhaps an angel whispered in their ears as depicted by Rembrandt. Even Christian scholars themselves know that this fantasy destroys any claim that the Gospel should be taken seriously. So this is important homework for Christians. Explore this tough issue in New Testament studies. Find out why we don't know if any Jesus saying in the Gospels is the real thing. Sad to say, there's no way to find out what Jesus would do.